Hi, so I made an entry for the Space Conflict contest, and this video is about my thought process while making each part of this level. So here we go. Let's start out by the planning stage. The level in the Space Conflict would obviously have a space theme. The thing is, there are already a lot of space-themed levels in Geometry Dash. Also, many entries are going to have spacey stuff like a dark background, stars and planets, so I wanted to approach the theme in a different direction, which is a journey to space. Surprisingly, there aren't many levels about going to space, so I guess I'll try. There wasn't a rule like 50% or more parts have to be strictly space themed, so hopefully this still counts. Also, I wanted to make a level with the song Spacesuit because it's a banger! I was too lazy to actually start making it, and it was in my songs I want to use but probably never going to use playlist. However, the Conflict contest was announced, and it was the perfect excuse to begin. As usual, I started by building a layout. Normally, I build ClickSync-based layouts because they are satisfying to play. But the very first part of the song barely has any melodies to make ClickSyncs. So I resorted to this off-sync mini robot gameplay. I mixed in long jumps and short jumps to make use of the game mode. The next cue part has some sound to make ClickSyncs, so I return to the usual. This part is structured in a way that you ascend with those platforms, and after the orb spam, the drop part begins. This part is where you ascend to space. The first version of this part was just stars being all over the place as well as coins scattered across to make it slightly more engaging, just like Finger Dash. But after decorating the first part, I thought this was too lazy, so I built the actual gameplay pretty late. For the gameplay itself, the camera is zoomed out and has a very high Y offset so you can see what's above. Also, there are giant spike barriers, which will disguise as clouds later to keep you on track. Finally, there are some pillars and studs to make the level more challenging. One of the main obstacles is those pillars where you have to squeeze through the gap. It's like Flappy Bird levels except it's rotated by 30 degrees. The last part is the space part, which has a low gravity gimmick. I guess this conflict would help you with gravity changes since it would be a very common gimmick among the entries. I wanted to give the feeling of slowly wandering in the vast space in this part. For the reason, the camera is zoomed out and there are barely any structures. Instead, the part consists of a lot of orbs so you can stay in the air for a long time. After some moments, there are space stations where your gravity temporarily becomes normal again. Hopefully you can notice the gravity has changes with this first click and use that knowledge to time the next clicks. The change back to the low gravity should be very obvious with this wall click. And after more orbs and one more space station, the level ends with this one final click. I tried to tie the gameplay to the plot of this level, so it tends to be kinda gimmicky for a 7-star level. But would you believe me that it was aimed at 5 stars initially? Yeah, I should stop underestimating the difficulty of my levels. Anyway, it's time to decorate. This part serves as the preparation for the lift-off themed around the rocket site. I'll divide this part into 2 sub-parts based on the game mode. When you start the level, you will walk through this site at dawn. It's kinda empty and static on purpose because the song itself is very calm here, and I wanted to emphasize the later parts. However, with that in mind, this part felt too boring, so I added those little creatures like drones and flying robots. By doing that, I could make this part more interesting to watch while keeping the serene nature. Also, I focused on lighting in this level as seen in those street lights. Despite making a good amount of levels, this is my first time to care about lighting since I'm not an art major or something. There's still a long way to go in the regard. Moving on to the next cue part, this is meant to convey rising. You can see structures, particles, and the sun in the background rising here. I think this represents the build-up of this song pretty well, even though it's not as intense as the other parts. In the transition between parts 1 and 2, there are 3 noteworthy things to cover. The first thing is those black borders. These limit visibility and give the sense of closeness. So when those borders open up, it can emphasize the openness in the drop part. This technique is very well used in other levels as well. The second thing is the rotation of the border right before it opens. It makes the transition into the next part more natural since the part is already rotated by 30 degrees. Also, I added a subtle animation of letters sliding down. Third thing are these animations of the strip and the bladders. These are kept on screen briefly after the transition is finished, so they can help build the connectedness between the two parts. Now we can talk about the ascending part. First, I added the constant motion blur shader, bead lines, and dust particles to give the feeling of rushing to the space. All of these obstacles produce particles when they pop out from the cloud, and some of those particles here have x-axis gravity to further enhance that feeling of rush. I tried to place those move triggers for obstacles late enough to be reactable, but not too late so the part feels alive. So this part can be divided into 4 subparts, each having a different theme and block designs. The first subpart contains floating islands and tree spikes, inspired by Sky Islands from Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. The second subpart has a similar sky fantasy stuff, but the time is changed to evening. Did you know that speed lines and dust particles are altered when you get to this part? It's pretty subtle, it feels so right to do so. I guess it's a part of the accurate lighting I was going for. The third part features a thunderstorm. Since the color of the background is similar to that of the blocks, I added light outlines to help distinguish those. Also, pixelate shaders are used in the lightning effects, and I learned those make the effects so much cooler. The shader wasn't only for the pixel levels, I guess. Anyway, say hi those two little boys at the background. Maybe these are familiar to you. The final subpart is very close to the space, so the block design is pretty similar to that of the next part. Honestly, there isn't much to say here. And then here's this transition. So the transition starts out by zooming into the player and showing some impact frames. By that, you can really feel the impact of going through the clouds. After this, you will see the player has arrived in the space. I made this lens flare effect to spotlight the player. Finally, the player jumps out of the ship and lands on a satellite. Here, it's obvious that there are structures that zooms in, but there's also a subtle usage of this blue gradient trigger. Objects further away from you tend to blend more with the background, so this gradient fades out as you get closer to those structures. This phenomenon is called atmospheric perspective, yeah, I just learned about this term, and is something to keep in mind when building backgrounds. I'm very proud of this transition, and I think it's my best one yet. Now we have finally arrived at the space. However, there is still more way to go. In this part, I wanted to emphasize the magicalness and weightlessness of the space. For the magic part, I used star particles to make block designs and the circle air deco. One noteworthy thing is the outline part of the circles is made only of 8 objects. You can turn on the relative setting of the particle and rotate it to make a star trail thingy. Also, I focus on the effects of the orbs to further enhance that magicalness. For the weightless part, I made the blocks move like this when they were touched. After the initial force is given by the cube, the block keeps moving slowly in that direction. Also, I made sure all movements in this part are slow enough so the objects here feel weightless. After roaming in the space for a bit, there's a little transition where you go into the space station. The motion blur shader is really good for those transitions where you move quickly in one direction. In the space station, you can see these floaty orbs. I added an invisible toggle orb behind those orbs and made that toggle orb activate some move triggers and particle triggers so you feel like you are kicking those orbs. Additionally, you can see those robot eyeballs invented by Boxcat. You can make these eyes fly at you by setting the aim mode in the rotate trigger and making one object in the group pink. After this short space station section, you are back to the outside. By the way, did you notice something about the stars at the jet layer? The height of these stars matches the notes of the music. Take a listen. I think it's cool to see taking the notes of the song into account for visuals, and I wish more levels did this. And then after one more space station and the outside section, the level ends. Now the gameplay and the decoration are finished, but the level can't be released yet. Here comes the polishing phase. 3 playtesters helped me find out the rough edges of this level and make this level even better. In the first part, there was feedback about blocks being hard to see. A common solution is placing jump indicators, and I seriously considered that. But I wanted players to actively engage with the environment, so I made outlines of the blocks brighter so they become more distinguishable. In the second part, playtesters thought the camera was rotated, and when they got into the wave part, they realized it wasn't actually rotated, so the wave wasn't moving as they expected. Honestly, it was surprising to see them not noticing going upwards in the ship part. To solve the problem, I made the gap of the first obstacle much larger, so players get more time to react. In the last part, one playtester said the last ore should not be bufferable. I absolutely agree with this, so this click feels more impactful. However, I was concerned that forcing not to buffer would be unfair to players. To be as fair as possible, I surrounded the last orb with fake orbs and added some fake orbs earlier to indicate you shouldn't press those. I'm sorry for those who died at 99%. I tried my best to reduce victims by adding this sign and the Q position indicator, but I won't change the ending itself because I like it that way. Lastly, there are two more details I'd like to mention. If you play the practice mode of this level, you will notice the death effect has changed. Using the event trigger and item related triggers, you can create something that changes between the two modes. They can also make the end screen only accessible in the normal mode. This normal mode exclusive end screen feature is inspired by STARGAZE. It's a banger level by the way. In addition, you may have noticed the level percentage reaches 100 exactly when the last orb is activated. However, the progress bar is time-based. Since there is an end screen, the percentage is supposed to be 90% at this point. Well, there's a secret way. If you click exactly 6 times during the first transition, the level ends earlier before showing the end screen. This secret way is only used to make the accurate progress bar. After all the effort, this is the final product. So this was the lift off. Thanks to Rooftop for choosing this as daily and giving the epic rating. Looking at the comments, the gameplay seems to be pretty divisive, especially at the ascending part and the last click. I guess this can be frustrating since the gameplay is a bit gimmicky for a 7-star level. Either way, I hope this was a memorable experience. So will this level get one of the Gauntlet spots? Absolutely not. This community is full of talented people. Will this level get in the top 20? Maybe if I get super lucky. Anyway, I'm happy to add one more level to be proud of. This level took 2 months of hard work to make, as well as some serious planning and execution. So if you like the level, I would appreciate your like and subscribe as a small reward. It takes like 2 seconds, right? But your 2 seconds of effort can motivate me so much to cook next levels. Thanks for watching.